Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast, back to real-time edition. We are recording this from Bottomless Lakes State Park in New Mexico, where the weather is finally sunny and warm, which pretty much guarantees that it's going to snow tomorrow. Peter, How's it going?
It's going well. This episode, we are going to be talking about a couple of the gravel races that almost turned to fat bike races that we attended here in, I guess we're in New Mexico, but the races were in Georgia. And the other state I'm looking for is Texas. So we'll talk about that and some of the learnings and some of the trends and hopefully some service for you, the listener, as far as gravel racing in general, racing early in the season. There'll be a lot to cover. So we're excited for that. But to your question, I am doing well. I am slowly getting warmer. So
I feel like you and DW have both just been, as soon as we have sunlight, you're just basking.
That's right.
You both look like lizards. Just like yesterday, DW was finally warm for the first time. I saw him. It was like watching the little pill bugs that are always like in the little tiny ball.
And then water on them.
They like, no, you don't put water on them. That's mean. No, it's like just these little bugs that are always
actual bugs. I thought you were talking about the little pills you give kids and then they turn into sponges.
No, but those are awesome.
Dino sponge.
Love those.
Okay.
No, like the little pill bugs that are always curled into a tiny ball. And then when they like are in whatever circumstance, I don't know what makes a pill bug unfurl, but they like unfurl. And
okay. Well, perhaps a future episode on pill bugs.
Anyway, yes, very excited to actually have some sunshine. But I mean, honestly, early season racing, that's just how it goes. But actually, Valley of Tears, the last gravel race we did in Texas, or you did in Texas, I was there doing some Shred Girl stuff with Strong Girl Publishing. So we got to set up, luckily, on the sunny day for that. And honestly, it was super cool. I got to talk to a lot of coaches, a lot of parents, a lot of juniors. Really, really fun, and huge shout out to our sponsor at Payable, because without Payable, doing these live events where we're selling kind of in real life would be so much clunkier. So we'd have to carry so much more stuff, be paying so many more subscription fees.
Well, I guess that's it. I mean, it might not even be clunkier, but you might have a Square reader that you're trying to get connected to the internet and someone's trying to tap their card. So it could be. I mean, it might be smoother a little bit, but for the small business owner or the one-time club registration fee or something like that, it can work fantastic. And the difference is someone's doing it on their own phone, which they probably feel safer about anyhow. And yeah, you just used a QR code, right? And then they went to the form.
Exactly, yeah. So Payable lets you take payments within a Google form. So yeah, in my setup, I have either the option for Venmo or the option to scan this QR code that takes you to the Google form. You fill it out with whatever you want to get. You know, in this case, we're talking about the Shred Girls books. And then it just walks them through the payment process, and then they just show me that they paid. So, you know, it's just super simple for when you're not doing a ton of these live events and you don't want to have to carry around a card reader and all that kind of stuff. A lot of my authors actually have it where they have their form set up so that way if they're in real life and, you know, a friend or acquaintance or family member, you know, whatever, another athlete at a meet wants to buy one of their books, boom, they just run through that and it's done. So it's a lot easier than dealing with the cash.
And we've been talking about how we've been using it, but a few people we know have reached out and let us know that they use it. There was a mountain bike club that's doing sort of a fundraiser, so a mug or something like that, and it's branded, so then people, again, can pick the mug they want. There's a couple different options, sizing, color, whatever, and then someone can check out. So then it's easy for them to collect the address and then do the payment. And then the other one was for a kids program. Again, registration, a bit of sort of waiver liability type stuff, and then collect the fee. And again, they were pretty much sold out by they came back after the weekend and away they went.
Yeah, so if you want to check it out for yourself, payableapps.com/athlete has sort of some of our favorite Google Forms templates just to get you started, or you can just do your own entirely from scratch Google form, and the Payable add-on really just walks you through it. So
and now if folks use our link, which is
payableapps.com/athlete,
then they can save on these fees for both the payable fees, which really aren't very much, but it does save you to get started and try it sort of no risk. And then also I believe there's a promo right now to save on Square fees if you choose to use Square as sort of the back-end merchant processor. answer.
Perfect. All right. We'll include that link in the show notes. And then quickly, I mentioned Strong Girl Publishing. A couple updates there. Number one being Shred Girls Book 4 is available for pre-order, both ebook, paperback, and dun-dun-dun audiobook. I'm so excited about this. First audiobook that we've put out. Really excited to hear how people react to it. The book launches on May 27th, so pre-orders are super helpful.
That's amazing.
Again, find those in the
Don't know
show
where you
notes.
find the time, but yes, hopefully everyone can support Molly in her writing endeavors. This is book
4.
No, but for you, 12?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well,
Give or
there
take.
you go. Fantastic. I'm trying to get one going here, and you're going to end up writing most of it, I think.
You already have. we have Becoming a
This is
Consummate
true.
Athlete together. You do
I have
a
a
book.
quarter of a book to my name.
The other thing is actually on the note of more things. If you are interested in hearing more about women and girls in sport, especially where kind of the blend of sports science and research really meets culture and just how it actually impacts athletes in real time, you can head over to my new podcast, Strong Girl Talk, which I am doing with Dr. Sasha Golish, a Canadian runner, researcher, all-around badass. I'm so excited about this. We just launched with 3 episodes on International Women's Day. Really excited. It's been really
Looks
fun.
fantastic. It seemed like the response was pretty good. And again, just another great example of women with so much going on and so impressive.
Too many things.
Okay. So
and-
support these women.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about you though.
Oh, yes. Back to the men.
Back to the men. Anyway, I feel like people enjoy our banter, so it's all right.
I guess. It's all in good, I don't know, faith, I guess. I don't know.
It's fine.
Okay, so we went down to these races.
Yes, we decided back in January, we always go somewhere warmer for a bit of training in the winter. And this worked out really well where you were kind of looking at this race in Atlanta, Georgia, or just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, homegrown gravel. I was able to connect with the promoter and do some Strong Girl publishing stuff there. Then you were kind of looking at Valley of Tears, which is run by a good cyclocross friend of mine, Micah Rice. He also was down for me doing some Strong Girl stuff there. So really just worked out super well to add these to our schedule as kind of low-key starter events for you for the season. But why do early season races, I guess?
Well, for me, so as an athlete, it was sort of, I don't like riding for a long time, and I've been doing these gravel races that are more 2.5, 3 hours, but even those seem long to me mentally. It's not that I can't finish them, but they just mentally seem like a lot. So my thought was when these came together, okay, I'm going to go and do these 100-miler, and then the second one was supposed to be 93 miles, so pretty much the same thing, many hours of racing, and they were pretty high caliber. There was a bit of prize money, not that I expected to get into it, but I was close. I was one spot off of the prize money at the first one, and just to get that sort of in as like a kickstart for training, a bit of an anchor for the November, December, January training, or motivator for that in February, I guess. And then as a coaching perspective, it was sort of just to see these couple events, so I can recommend these events, which I do. They're both well done. And then also just to see the tech and the fueling and what are the pros doing, what are the amateurs doing at these events, because the only way to really see it, you can look at the news reports and the gossip and the YouTubers and everything else, but to go there as a coach and just watch what are the top people doing, what is the women's race developing into now that the women's race is separated a lot of times, with all this fueling talk, with all this tires, are fat bike tires all of a sudden in gravel. So what is actually happening? How are they making these decisions? So as a coach, I was most interested in going just to sort of do this recon and to say that I've been at them, right? I think there's a bit of if you've never been to the, or haven't been in a while, or haven't, even for me to race 100 miles, because it's been, technically since Leadville, I think, since I've raced 100 miles.
So quite a while, yeah.
So for all those reasons, it seemed good. And then again, we sort of stacked this into going out west, so it fit with our plans to drive out more slowly and see people along the way, which is really that community and a bit of adventure. A lot of these I'm getting to see new areas too, both in the pre-rides and the day after, the weeks between, and then also just the race course. While I'm working really hard and racing, it's also a bit of a tour of this place we wouldn't have gone in Georgia. Georgia or into Turkey, Texas, and see some great scenery and course as well. So I think all those things sort of wrapped in together. It was checked a lot of boxes.
For sure. And I think we'll end up doing posts on both of those races, just sort of with some of the intel around, where to stay, what to do, where to eat, that kind of stuff, because I think, a lot of these newer races, those races are both kind of growing in popularity, but they're still kind of, details are still scarce around the actual like rider experience, kind of like how to do it when you're traveling to the race versus if you live in Atlanta, then homegrown is super easy. If you're coming down, it's a little bit trickier. Not bad, just there's kind of a lot of options. And
it seems like a great one with the Atlanta airport being so close there for sure.
For sure, yeah. You would definitely need a rental car if you're going to do an airport, though. So again, this is stuff that I'll probably put together into a blog
well, I
post.
wouldn't promise that, but you can if you'd like to.
I promise it.
Okay.
Well, I need some article ideas anyway. I think you're exactly right from a coach perspective. I think a lot of the time, all the time, the coverage is very much focused on the extremely pointy.
The shocking thing. Yeah, I think that's what Kylie and Zoe, when they were on, say, like, we're going to continue to make recommendations based off of outliers.
Which makes no sense.
Not really, right? Like LeBron James does this or whatever, but does that apply to a 60-year-old person doing the gravel race for fun and not having time to train? I don't know why LeBron James is playing racing bikes there, but you get what I say. It would be, again, whoever, the top racer, you pick your favorite. How much does that apply to the average person?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, you take Valley of Tears, for example, it's very cold on the start line. It's going to hail, it's going to snow, it's going to rain during your race. What Keegan Swenson is wearing on the start line is very different than what someone who's still finishing perfectly respectably, like a mid-pack finisher. Heck, even honestly, you were in the top 20, but even what you were doing and how you were preparing would be...
I would say that Keegan and I were dressed very similarly.
I'm shocked by that.
But I would say that you could say the top 20, which I did achieve top 20.
I'm just shocked by that because you're always cold, so I'm surprised that the main guys weren't.
I mean, that one, and both races ended up being quite chilly, so like at freezing to start. And so it's tough to pick your clothing for that. There is sort of the cyclocrossy thing of, you don't wear leg warmers. We've talked about that before if you want to win.
Don't win races.
And this idea that the people at the front, what Molly's getting at, the people at the front tend to generate a lot of heat. They're done sooner. They can deal with a lot of pain. They're going to risk things like frostbite or missing that at the chance that they are lighter or more efficient or whatever. Maybe their leg warmers aren't getting soaking wet when they're running through puddles. So There is that, but I think in this particular one, Keegan would have been bundled up. But I think you're also not wrong that someone going a little slower or twice as or half as fast would need to be bundled up a bit more, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there is also the reality, like, while all of the people we work with do want to do their best, some of them very much are going for podiums, going for top 10s, going for top 20s. But the reality is, 99% of people aren't going for a paycheck when they're racing. So when I look at, the Keegans of the world, the Sophias of the world, they're going for the $2,500 that's on the fit. Like, that's the prize for winning. For them, it's a payday. For even for you, like,
I was going to say, I don't think 99% is even accurate, but maybe it is. It's probably, how many people would get paid? It's at this event, it wouldn't be that many. Maybe there was 10 people got paid. So.
Yeah, but 1,000 people didn't race. So
okay.
It's somewhere between 90 and 99%. Whatever. You all get the idea. What I'm saying is, like, you're racing for fun. Right? Like, you're there racing because you want to. And it's not to say that Keegan hates racing or anything, but, like, for him, this is a work day, right? This is a day at the office. For most of us, most of the people we work with, there is an element of, we do this because we love it, because it's fun. So sometimes doing exactly what the pros do, guess what? That's not going to be fun. That's going to be really freaking cold and like very uncomfortable because they're in it for the Benjamins, I guess. They're in it for the money, which isn't a bad thing. It's just a different lens with which they are looking at the race.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So early season, how does that kind of affect your training? Because right now is the time of year where most people are kind of in that base phase. So how does sprinkling in races like this actually work with, kind of that base preparation phase? Can it work with it?
So it would be irregular. It is irregular. So usually you would not. You might see someone do other types of sports. Maybe you've been doing cross-country skiing or fat biking or Zwift racing. And then you'd sprinkle those maybe through the base phase sometimes. But in very standard textbooky terms, you wouldn't generally race in the accumulation phase. You would race later in like your competition phase. So for me, this is a little irregular, but I've also been training since October, essentially. So I do, I've done several base blocks now, but they have been indoors. So the first race, we drove down, so it was not perfect, which again, they didn't have to be because it wasn't my main race of the year, but I was sitting in a van for probably 3 days, and then we got out of the van, got my bike ready, and I started racing 100 miles. So it was a little odd, but that just sort of fits in as, again, it's just an experience. So you're gathering information, you're getting early information about testing, you're practicing pacing, practicing fueling. And what I was able to do in preparation was to trial out some of that fueling, to get information about my power data that I could maybe use a bit during the race, just to triangulate that a little bit. And then also assess the race, I should say, too. That's the other thing, is like, how good of a job did you do using the fitness that you believe you had from indoor? That would be the other thing. But yeah, it's a more, I would say it's like sort of a irregular or advanced maneuver to put races like this in your base block.
Okay, but here's my counter to that. So, a lot of the time in base phases, we would be going out and doing long rides on weekends. So I think I'm going to argue that for some people, that actually, like homegrown Valley of Tears, like 100 milers, like actually do fit into base phase, especially if you can approach them like a little bit more chill. We talked a couple weeks ago about the, A, B, and C races, how they fit in, how to like view them. Mm-hmm. I think you could view these as C races that still fit into a base phase, because I do think you going out and riding that same course could have
wouldn't do it, number one.
Okay, yeah, we wouldn't. That's what I'm trying to say. So, you could go out and ride that exact same course, but I'm going to argue that the effort and energy you would have expended to ride that same course by yourself with, no aid station options, no people along the route, no one to draft off of or, work with, I think you would have actually had a harder day riding that completely solo with, just following the GPS.
It could be, for sure. And even if it wasn't, even if this is harder, it's okay to include these. We'll often put something like big adventure to finish the block. So every month, I always joke there's a long weekend in Canada every month. So we do a big long weekend block. This is something Kristen Legan talked about in the run up to Unbound. Rather than, worrying about doing 20 hours every single week, then you do once a month you do a long weekend, whether that's an artificial one you've just taken Friday off work, or you ride an extra day on Friday, or it is a long weekend and you can do Friday and or Monday. You just add a bunch of volume and maybe a big ride in there, whatever big means. And so that would be the way to look at this, would be that these were sort of two big training stimulus.
Yeah, I look at them as just like almost like, again, you were racing, to be clear, but I look at them as almost paid group rides that are fully stocked, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we saw people at Valley of Tears, again, the weather deteriorated rapidly, but we saw people getting, driven back in on, the back of big trucks because their bikes were just jammed full of mud and they, didn't want to keep going. There are aid stations along the way, so you don't need to carry all of your stuff. Mm-hmm. So I do, the route is fully marked, so you don't really need to stress about like where you're going to ride. So
that's it, right? So there's sort of this, we could talk about the testing aspect, and then what is training? Like so if we think about training, not just physiology, not just your watts, but also group riding, navigation, technical skill, tactical skill. We always say all the ALs, any of these words, mental, right? I want to quit once it gets to about 90 minutes. And I'm like, why do I want to quit? It's like, oh, that's because that's the races you often do and prefer. So again, I was trying to pull this out so that I did longer ones, and then maybe the 3-hour ones I won't get that in the middle where I'm feeling a bit lost and sad and tired and beat up. So to try and do that, and that could be mental, It could be physiological. It could be tactical because I just send the first 90 minutes and then, run out. So there's a bit of pacing or tactical elements there. So all the aspects of training, and some of this, like Molly's saying, some of us aren't good navigationally. So we'll just never do an adventurous route, or we don't feel safe going off-road because it's dangerous for whatever danger is near you, right? Whether it's just you don't want to crash and be alone, or there's animals or people that, risk that you have to avoid.
I was just going to say, I think this is actually super relevant to women because, I'm out there running while you're riding, and I keep telling you, it's one of those things that it's just so hard for you to understand where I'm coming from when I say, like, yeah, running on this rail trail makes me incredibly nervous. And for you, it's like, why would you be nervous? You're on this just out and back rail trail. It just keeps going forever. And I'm like, that's it. It keeps going forever. There's nothing around.
Well, I was thinking even in Bentonville. So we were in Bentonville in between these two events, which this is a great line. Like I think it's been very cold for us, but it's a great little trip. If someone wanted to replicate this, again, maybe this is part of Molly's blog article she's putting in, but this sort of Atlanta to Bentonville to over to Turkey, and then you could return home or whatever you do. But it's a great set of sort of 2 weeks there you could do. So I rode the Big Sugar course, the 50 miler, I should say, not the full thing. And the number of dogs in that area is just nuts. And so even I said to you, I can sprint okay and get away from most dogs. But I had one run me off the road, and then I don't know what you would do if you didn't have enough speed to get away. I guess it's a motivator to start developing your speed, but that would be something in a race. Often they've tried to tell people to keep their dogs in, or there's at least a bit of safety there. So that would be maybe another thing when you're talking about safety and why these races might make sense to do that. And then I had mentioned testing. So we talked about all the different things that go into training, and often we get really narrow-minded and think FTP, but then forget that racing success has all these other things. And then testing would be midway through, especially a long base block where it's like October, November, and then into January, February, March, April, and you're not racing till, say, July. It's just a long time to go without a true test. And test is that sort of crucible or that going and putting it on the line and seeing, how did this work? How did all my Zwifting and strength training and any of the stuff I did, how does that turn into a gravel race that's 100 miles? And so getting that feedback in February or March actually isn't the worst thing, because now if my next race isn't till, when is that race? May. So I have March, April, and a bit of May to try and improve some of these aspects. But I don't have to chase some things because I realize, okay, I'm actually doing okay with this type of thing. But it got really hard at this time, duration or intensity or number of repetitions or type of climb or fueling or tactics, whatever. Then you sort of can go off in a direction. And that's really why we test, isn't just to say my FTP. I always want to know, well, what do we do with that information? Can we take something and say, well, this is the limiter. This is what we should try and go after. Based on that. So I think in a lot of ways, this early effort, if you can suspend some of this needs to be the best race of your life and not just quit because it didn't go perfectly, because it may not. In fact, it probably won't, right? But that would be the idea, is that then this testing can probably inform what you would like to work on for the next period of time.
For sure, yeah. Okay, so for you, we just mentioned when we got to Homegrown, it was really your first ride outdoors in over...
You reminded me of this after the race, which I thank you for.
Yep. Well, it had been well over a month since you rode outside, because even when we were down in New Jersey with my family for the holidays, normally it's warm down there. It was not.
No,
I think the cold, we just have
snow.
this some people have the dark cloud with rain over top of their heads when they're grumpy. You and I just have just a cold cloud of snow. My coach, David Roche, actually I was very grumpy in my comments lately with my training log. And he's like, you're like Elsa from Frozen. It's like, I am so if you want to know what I'm listening to on my workout on Wednesday playlist, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be the soundtrack from Frozen. But yeah, so going from indoors to 100 miles outdoors, how would you do anything differently, looking back, or how was the transition, or, mentally what's the best way to kind of get over that hurdle, because you're not going to be the only one, other than if you can probably leave a little earlier. We in our traditional we can do it all methodology of doing things, I had done a talk in Toronto on Thursday. The gravel race was on Saturday. So we had Thursday at 3 p.m. My talk was over and we started the drive to Georgia. So there was no ability to go earlier to pre-ride, but that probably would have been option or important thing to do, number one.
So, I mean, I didn't train a lot indoors, but maybe my biggest week was 15 hours or something like that, which would be strength and a little bit of skiing and a little bit of running thrown in there. Probably the biggest days to get ready and to do the fueling would be, there'd be, say, a Friday with some intervals, Friday or Saturday with some intervals, and then probably a run in the afternoon. Or a ski, because the conditions got where skiing was sort of the only option.
You did some treadmill too. You had some double indoor days, which I salute you for. I did not touch the treadmill.
There was a few days where I didn't leave the house for sure. Yeah. So I did that. Longest ride was just 3 hours and 10 minutes or something, where I tried to fuel. And then again, that would be the day after doing something that was maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours with some intervals. So pretty big work capacity and moving. Did a bit of heat as well, so finishing some of those harder stuff in the way that we talked about with Stephen Chung, where you do the intervals and then you dress up and turn the fans off and do that for, say, 20, 30, 40 minutes. All the active. I didn't do much bath stuff in the approach into this one, did more of the active stuff. And sometimes those treadmill runs would be done for that heat instead of doing it at the
really
end.
Good that you were so heat adapted. It really helped with the 2 races that were below freezing.
Yes. Yeah, certainly didn't. So yeah, that was the main thing. So it was really just trying to get a 3 hour, and why 3 hours? I don't know. It's about as much as I think is probably reasonable on the trainer most of the time.
I think pretty much every expert I've talked to has said that 3 hours on the trainer is about the maximum that anyone should bother doing on the trainer, except extenuating circumstances.
Or if you're a pro, I don't regret.
No, I will guarantee you that no pro is doing over 3 on the trainer.
I don't know if
maybe I wouldn't make that exact.
Yeah, why would you make that bet? So
sorry.
They definitely are, but not regularly, right? I think that's the misnomer. There's people that do it, but I think when you look at the pros, they often don't. And they would use things like double days or cross training, or they just go places that they don't have to ride the train.
That's what I was going to say. No, they're not, because if you're pro enough that you need to be doing more than 3 hours on the trainer, you are not home doing 3 hours on the trainer, unless you're an e-sport specific person. And even then,
it's when Vanderpool gets paid to be on the Zwift thing that he rides the Zwift stuff. And even Pogača on that Peter Attia podcast that every Masters man likes to send me weekly, I get an email. Thank you.
We appreciate you.
And so Pogača was on there talking about his zone 2, so everyone gets really excited because his zone 2 power is so high. But then that's what he also said, because Peter Attia is all you need to do zone 2 indoors, and he sort of asked him if he does that, and Pogača was I would not ride indoors. I think he said he would not. I don't even think it was maybe the weather. So that's sort of privileged as well, right? That you have the time, money, and that's your job, as you say, right? So
yeah, which again, gets back to my top of the race, pointy end doesn't really matter as much. Side note, you mentioned Zwift. We didn't mention this at the top of the episode, but huge shout out to former Consummate Athlete coaching client. He is no longer a coaching client because Noah Ramsey won the Zwift Academy challenge, whatever you want to call it. He won. He's now on the Alopecia Dunkirk Devo team. We're so freaking excited for him. So yeah, now he is coached by. Do we get to say it?
I don't know.
Anyway, he's coached by that team's coach, which is ridiculously exciting. Just huge kudos to him. Huge kudos to you, Peter, for seeing him when he was 17 and he came to you and kind of taking him under your wing and helping him develop as a mountain biker, crit racer and e-sport
just
rider.
A good all-around athlete and bike rider, right? Which I think is proven by his run. What do they call it in Rewatch? We love the Rewatchables podcast. If you haven't watched that, it's about movies and just sort of talking about them. And so they do a run. So and then Apex Mountain. So I don't think this is Noah's Apex Mountain where it's the peak of his career, but they talk about the run people will go on if they make movies that are really good. From 92 to 95, they had this run where Macaulay Culkin does Home Alone and
Home Alone,
Uncle Buck,
and Home Alone.
I don't know, a lot of Home Alone movies. Probably more of a John Hughes thing in that case, I guess. But in any case, Noah had the Zwift things were going very well. The Zwift Academy races on there, but then he also had Iceman.
He won Windsor's biggest
biggest crit in Windsor. He also did a beer mile. He was third in the beer mile, but he hadn't run in a while.
Top 5 in a short track mountain bike World Cup, 11th in a cross country World Cup. Really
and then
great
won this
season.
camp. So yeah, that ended on Saturday. If you didn't watch the videos on GCN's YouTube, they're pretty good. Actually, I don't watch a lot of that stuff, but they were pretty entertaining and they did a good job on them.
Yeah, and we have an interview with Noah coming up next week, and also grab this upcoming issue of Canadian Cycling Magazine, where I have an article kind of all about him and how this came to be. So yeah, just huge shout out to him there.
So the Zwift, but Zwift would be another thing to talk about where you could get a bit of racing stimulus. Is that something that you struggle in the race with, holding the wheel, not being on your pace? This is the person who always rides in erg mode and calls it zone 2, even though it's probably a little harder. And so those people are just going to get blown off the back at the first acceleration in a gravel race, which could be fine if you just want to ride alone in the gravel race. But if this is a goal to improve in it and find some wheels across the race, then that would be a way to use something indoors where you have to go. A lot of athletes I work with have been using Training Peaks Virtual, which I really, really like. And both systems and most systems have these pace groups where you ride in sort of a group and there's sort of like an agreed upon range of power that you would do. And I really, really like them for endurance rides. It's much more variable, but you seem to end up at the spot and it's sort of fun, right? Because again, you have to sort of surge and then you're like, oh, I'm barely pedaling. And that sort of sounds a lot like a gravel race where you're like, this is way too easy. I'm going to attack all these people. And then suddenly you get dropped. That's what happens to me in most gravel races. So getting used to that feeling of the surging and then enjoying the respite between.
Love it. Okay, so, kind of coming back to gravel racing itself, 2025, what's trendy? What were you noticing at either of these races?
Well, the big tires definitely seem to be part of it.
They also seem to really screw you when it gets muddy.
So there was that. So that was the undoing for Keegan and Tobin. I think
Torben?
Yes. Probably most of the people.
Why haven't they started a podcast together?
I don't know.
Tobin and Torben?
It's true.
Someone get on this.
They did seem, and this course, there was a bit of off-road. There was a lot of really chunky rail trail on it, like miles and miles and miles of it. So definitely I was just riding 38 and a 40 on the front tire, and definitely took a lot to keep that somewhat smooth and keep moving in a group where everyone else pretty much had bigger tires. So I don't know. I think Jeff Kabush even said probably 45s are probably now sort of what used to be the 38-40 is now you probably would run a 45, but it depends so much on the race. Again, if there's going to be an issue with mud, you'd go narrower. If there's a lot of road, you might still go narrow. Something like Paris to Ancaster, you might still go narrower. Remembering that Paris to Ancaster up until recently was all on cyclocross with 33 or 32 C tires. So it is evolving, but I think some of that, from what I understand, is just the tires becoming better and better quality, and then also the frames being able to take them. So I always try and understand, same as the carbohydrate stuff, which we'll talk about in a second, why is this suddenly different? Right? Like, why is it just wider is better always? So I think that's some of what we're seeing, is that the tires are getting to be better quality, and then also the frames are starting to take it. Still, a lot of frames won't go over 45. Even Trek's newest gravel bike, the Checkmate doesn't really go over 45. So
yeah, I do want to throw out like a cyclocross hack here. Do you remember when everyone was riding with paint stirrers in their back pockets?
Is that cyclocross? I think that's Unbound.
I think it started in cyclocross, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Why
that's
wouldn't you just change your bike?
Well, I think that's a big thing they were doing in the pit to like start getting some of the grime off.
Oh.
Especially when the
it's
days
definitely an Unbound thing, but
the days when pressure washers were not working.
But the paint stick would probably be relevant if this race in Turkey, Texas proves to be something that if they do race when it's really muddy, right? Because they canceled the race. I don't know if we talked about that yet, but they shortened it twice. They shortened it during the race as well as before the race.
So it went from being 93 to 70 to 50 miles.
Yeah, roughly. I don't know I guess that was the idea.
Give or take. Yeah. So anyway, my point being, I think if you have the bigger tires, know how to deal with the mud on them. Like a lot of people, it'd be their first time having that because, I've said this for cyclocross, I've said it for mountain biking. The problem with mountain bike and cyclocross and gravel racing is often you don't train in the conditions that you're like bad conditions that you're racing in, because it would actually be unethical to train in those conditions.
Well, and poor,
right?
like you damage all your equipment, so then it would be expensive, and then also
You're not
it would
supposed
just
to use
it
the
wouldn't be
trails.
great training. Yeah, yeah. So increasingly, that's the situation, right? People just don't go outside to train.
Well, and local mountain bike trails, you're not supposed to use them when it rains. That's bad for the trails. So it is kind of hard to learn these tactics. But I think if you're, new to gravel racing, think about, what am I going to do if my tires are so gunked with mud that it's like stopping me? Okay, what do I have in my pocket that can possibly help with this?
So it is do you gamble and go to slightly narrower to give your frame some clearing distance, and then like Molly says, you could do something like carry a bit of something that's going to help you poke the mud out.
I remember the best tip Luke Keogh, who was a great cyclocross racer back in the day, ever gave me was on a muddy course. Whenever you see a puddle, a lot of people try to go around the puddle, but whenever you see water standing, that's actually a great chance to go through it. Yes, you will get wet and it will be cold, but you will also shed a lot of the mud. So that's something I think of like all the time on races like this. Now, I don't think there was a lot of standing water on the course yet when you were doing this race, but
No.
just, in those situations.
Yeah, sometimes that can be faster if it's just like a really shallow water. They say the water follows the path of least resistance. So sometimes in mountain biking you'll do that. But yeah, sometimes that'll clear it, and sometimes that's not the peanut buttery, really sticky mud too. You have to it's really cool because you do have to keep reading constantly where the smoothest, fastest line is on the roads. Even we were swerving from left to right across the roads in places. It was sort of fun and sort of chaotic at the same time. But yeah, so that's the tires. I don't think there's anything revolutionary there. It does seem like inserts maybe people are talking less about now that they've gone to such big tires. I think if you're someone like me, where the bike we have down here it just doesn't hold. That's why I didn't run 40. I have 45s, but they don't fit this bike. I did run inserts, and then that let me run lower pressure so that at least when we are on the super bumpy stuff, I'm not getting so beat around. So I do think that that's still something you could do if you don't want to run bigger tires or you can't. Then
Right.
The inserts I still think are valuable for bigger people. Again, I always say if I had a junior athlete, I would definitely have one in the rear wheel so they don't bust the wheels so often. So that's that. I don't know if there's anything else on tires that I saw that really stuck out. A lot of still just pretty slick tires, which I think probably makes sense. But a lot of these ones that are smooth in the center, people even started. I was surprised that they started with those versus something more. I love the Maxxis Rambler or something like that. But seems like a lot of people are going more to that slick center with some cornering knobs, so a semi-slick.
Perfect. Okay, what about fueling though? Like, this is kind of the other consistently major discussion. How much are we fueling? What are we doing for fueling?
It is interesting because the gels, so it's definitely everyone, 50 to 100 grams, whatever people are doing a lot. I don't think that's rocket science. And I think my biggest takeaway is that probably what we're going to see for the age grouper is that rather than all of us not eating anything, the like eating is cheating thing from the aughts and the 2010s.
Yes, eating is cheating. That was the problem.
Yeah, don't look over here for this other cheating. I mean, the other cheating let the not eating work.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the not eating works so well.
So we're all sort of recovering from this. So with the masters, especially masters men that I work with, I try and convince them that you gotta fuel your training, especially, and then yes, race day too. But I think most of them probably fueled okay during, especially these longer races. You don't get through these things without fueling something. But I do think what most of these masters, age groupers, period, what we're leaving on the table is the still with the fasted and the not enough and the losing weight and the 5 pounds. That's still, I think, a huge area. So with my masters, that's where I try and push is like all the other people you're racing, most of the other people you're racing are still on this eating is cheating thing. And if we can get around that, you're just going to see that little extra bit, that 1 or 2% extra every day that then in theory will add up to better on race day just because you recover faster and train more. And that's as we try and guess at why all these records are being beaten, especially in the running world, but also when we look at the watts per kg in the pro peloton, there's this question of, is it the other stuff that was cheating still there and we just don't know how to catch it, which is probable. But also, is it some of this stuff around fueling that people are just fueling their training? And I want to believe that that's a big part at the pro level. But for the rest of us, I think that is something to look at. Now, what occurred to me during this gravel race is we see a lot from the running world too. And so gels are a big deal. Everyone's talking about like the number of gels and what type of gels are you using? These gels are like bigger than the old ones, more carbs. But I think in the gravel racing, I'm still seeing a lot of the top people often with like just a third bottle in their back. And that might be one of these squeeze bottles, more like what you'd see in running. That's just a really rich gel, really rich mix, not a gel, but they've almost made their mix into a gel, a really heavy mix in either a squeeze bottle or a third bottle that they're keeping in their back pocket. But then I think in their bottles, they're running mix that's heavy, or at least one of the bottles. And so I think with cycling, it is harder to get that gel into your mouth. Whereas running, you have both hands and you can do lots of stuff while you're power walking a bunch of the time too. So I do think that while you are seeing people using gel still for sure in cycling, I do think if the goal is to get in more, you sort of have to come to terms with putting mix in your bottles to get it in, or else you're just not going to get. The hour goes by very quickly and you forget that you need to take in 2.5 of these even super big gels to get 100 grams.
Or it's just, there's weather, right? Like you were in like echelon formation because of wind all day. You're like, the ground is bumpier than you expected. It's muddier than you expected. Mm-hmm. There's so many things in, gravel and mountain bike, like any off-road kind of discipline where, it's 1 minute you're totally fine and having a gel would be really easy. And then the next 2 hours, your hands are not leaving the handlebars. That's just not an option.
Especially if skill is a limiter, right? And that is when people are asking about skills for gravel. A lot of times I'll put one of the days in a training plan as gravel skills. Sometimes it's mountain bike / cyclocross / gravel skills. But the gravel skills, while certainly could be bunny hop, certainly could be cornering, a lot of it is, can you ride? This is one of the screens we give our new athletes when they come in is, can you ride with one hand around in a circle? And then can you make a corner, like a 90-degree corner, riding no hands? And so we could easily make this like, can you take a gel with riding no hands? Or can you take a bottle or your jacket off while you're riding no hands? You can make whatever thing you want, but it's sort of a yes-no. Can you ride without?
Just want to be clear, those are not easy skills. I still really suck at them.
Most people
like
can't.
I can't.
You could run World Cup mountain bikers probably through that, and I bet you'd be few. Like there'd be a bunch, more than you would think would not pass those two assessments. And so, as Molly says, this isn't today go out and you'll fix it. But you should work on it, because if you have back pain, if you need to, again, adjust clothing, if you want to have a snack, it's a lot nicer to sit up, ride no hands, and take your gel and, put the little gel tab into the other pocket. And it really enables it. If you can't get no hands, I don't even know, like, I guess you could do a gel, but you're definitely spitting your gel tab on the ground, which technically you get disqualified if you do that, if we're going by the letter of the law. So in any case, I think we have to come to terms with using mix or a combination thereof. And then, as always, if your race is getting longer and longer and longer, then you'll see more solids. But of course, as has always been the case, you'll see less and less solids the faster and faster, then the harder and harder the race is.
For sure. Okay, last thing I want to touch on is, both of these races very cold. This is the nature of early season races. Neither of these races should have been as cold as they were. These were both like very cold, like unprecedented cold for those
I wonder,
areas
did we jinx ourselves with the Stephen Chung cold episode where I pretended like I was doing a fat bike race on the day of the of the homegrown gravel race, and everyone was like, well, what fat bike race are you doing? And then it turned out we were just doing a gravel race that was at sub-freezing temperatures.
Yeah, no, this is on you entirely, for sure. But Paris to Ancaster, Barry-Roubaix, both races, early season, northern areas, traditionally very cold. What are sort of some of the tips for getting through these races? We are clearly very bad at we're going to getting through the races. We are very bad at being prepared for the cold in terms of our van setup, but more on that in another article.
So we've done okay, but yeah, we don't have insulation or heating in our van. So having it sub-zero a lot of nights has been dicey. For sure. So I would say if this was your A race, say Paris to Ancaster, Barry-Roubaix, friends of ours just did Southern Cross. I think the weather was actually okay at Southern Cross. What else is early that people do? Mid-South is a big one now as well that people will go to. Early races. if you're racing April or earlier, probably, you should be when you sign up, you should know that it could be snowing almost regardless of where you are in the world. It could be snowing. So I think from the Stephen Chung episode, keeping your face warm. So if you look at the start, any of the pictures from this Valley of Tears race, Keegan has a neck warmer on, a hat, what is that? A cycling cap on, a thermal or like rain thermal coat similar. I used what is the company? Castelli has a coach. Chris Mayhew told me this is the coat to get, so I got this coat and I've raced in it twice. I didn't intend to race in this winter coat, but it is an amazing coat. Not the most. It's a higher priced coat because it's exceptional quality. Keegan had one. I don't know who his sponsor is, but you could look that up.
I think is Velocio.
Yes.
At any rate, we'll include a link to that Castelli coat in the show notes. I will actually plug for Velocio here. They also have really good bib tights that I would highly recommend. And I'm not a huge fan of like thermal fleece line tights, I think, or even leg warmers. I think your legs do end up getting hot unless it's like literally like below 0 Fahrenheit,
right.
Especially in a race kind of situation. But if I had raced at Valley of Tears, I would have 100% been wearing the Velocio Luxe bib tights because they're just a thin normal like bib short fabric, right, but all the way to the ankles with some wind paneling, and they are so good.
And I think you need to know yourself. There was bigger gentlemen there who were standing there not shivering with shorts on, and I think a vest and maybe a long sleeve jersey. Keegan's wearing these
deep winter
all weather waterproof. We're wearing booties. We have winter gloves, lighter but winter gloves on. I like the ones, Molly laughs at me, but the Craft makes really nice ones that have the mitt that folds over your choice of the number of fingers it folds over. So if it
you just look like a dork when it's like the 2 fingers out. Sorry.
So if it goes sideways, you can actually go to full mitt mode. Or if it got really warm, then you can tuck the mitt into the top of the glove so it's not flopping all around. And then, of course, you can take them off. So at Homegrown Gravel, I ended up taking them off and just finishing the race with no gloves. I actually had my other gloves with me, but I was starting to overheat a bit there. Whereas at Valley of Tears, I didn't change my glove. None of my clothes came off the entire race. So.
Okay, that's actually a really good question. The other thing I saw at Valley of Tears that I loved is I saw a couple guys with like shower caps over their helmets, which is like classic Rebecca Rush.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I might actually be responsible for that because I think I'm the first one that like published that tip from her.
Sure.
Like probably 10 years ago.
So they were in full emergency mode. I saw Tobin didn't have booty, so he was doing the plastic bag over top of your sock inside your shoe. So even at the top, sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah. But okay, to your point, Homegrown, the race, we knew it was going to warm up later in the day. Valley of Tears, it was actually only going to get colder and worse conditions. But talk to me about a lot of these morning starts. It is colder, it is crappier, and then, it gets nicer, it gets warmer. Paris Lancaster is probably one of the most vicious examples of this, especially because it's a remote start. So it's even trickier to figure out what to wear. So talk to me about what to wear to start and how to think about it.
This is probably an experience thing too, because what's the classic rule they always give you is you should be cold on the start in this type of situation. So this is road group rides. This is races like this or Leadville. You're probably sitting there shivering because later it will be less painful to not be sweating and more performance enhancing.
I'd also point out pre-race nerves make you a little bit more prone to shivering almost irregardless. So I do think almost pretend that it's like 10 degrees warmer than it actually is as you're getting ready, because your pre-race nerves are going to make you feel colder and like even as I say this, I can feel my body like jittering a bit.
Right.
So yeah, just be aware that like you're going to feel shivery no matter what.
I guess that makes sense. Like a fear response, you're shivering, you're getting goosebumps. That sort of makes sense that someone could have that. So I think that makes sense. And you're trying to, I don't know, it's just hard. I really don't like it. But I think what you want to do is think, knowing that if I am a person who overdresses especially, but even if I'm not, how am I getting cooled down once I get overheating? And can you do that without stopping? So some people will just stop and they'll just take off their mitts and their toque or their beanie or whatever. But can you take the things you have on and adjust them. So I talked about my gloves getting tucked in, and then I could take my gloves off. This is where being able to ride no hands is important again. But can arm warmers get pulled down, get pulled off? We talk about the bag up the front of the shirt is probably what I would do at something like Leadville to just try and get a bit of warmth. And then the bag's inconsequential. You just stuff it in your pocket. Afterwards, it takes up no room. That's what you're sort of looking for, is what are these things that can get removed. So I've seen people modify things like neck warmers or just even pieces of fabric that go up the front of their helmet so they're not complete hats.
Ooh,
and then they
love
can sort
that.
of like pull the tab and it pulls the fabric out of their helmet.
Oh my God, it's like cycling and stripping, just
I
like
guess, yeah. Yeah, little tabs. So that's I think the stuff. And then of course, if you have support, or some races will let you leave your old sweatshirt for the donation or something afterwards. You can wear those over top. So those would be things to ponder. But again, this is where experience, you make that mistake once or twice, and then you are able to convince yourself that overheating is worse, or that you even overheat. I'm not really someone who really, at homegrown, if I had more fitness, I would have been in a bit of trouble with that coat, I think. So probably was a little, but it was it went from not well below freezing, but I'm trying to use what would it be, like
I think it was about
29 or something in Fahrenheit.
I would say I think it was 27, and it got up to like 60 Fahrenheit.
At least, yeah. Like high teens in Celsius. I don't know why we're mixing all our Fahrenheit and Celsius, but this is a math thing. So yeah, some races are just tough, and that's the nature of it. But trying to think, what are my options? Can I give myself options in my preparation so that whatever happens, if it goes sideways and it's snowing, do I have an emergency plan that might actually let you do really well if you can keep thriving? And if it gets too warm, do I have a plan to pull stuff off? Again, maybe just pulling some gloves off or unzipping a coat or whatever.
Love it. Okay. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think that's probably the main learning we had there. I think we, again, recommend both these races if you can put those on your schedule for next year. It's not sponsored. We came down here on our own, so feel free to do that. I think that's a good summary of sort of this early season learning. Now it's sort of back to work.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing is just if you are looking for, you have a spring race that you've now realized is 8 or 12 or 16 weeks out. Definitely head over to consummateathlete.com. We have training plans. We have, pre-made ones. We have custom ones. Obviously, we have coaching. So definitely, now is the time to get going if you haven't already.
That's right. We have a wait list for, I think it's April starts for coaching. We're full until April, so you can put your name on that wait list. Or even if you're just getting ready for a specific race and it's coming quickly, a phone consultation where we just talk through your strategy to get ready, and then race day, what is the fueling, what is the dressing plan, the clothing plan. That's a fantastic phone consult.
Cool. We'll include that link in the show notes. All right. With that, have a great week of training, and we will catch you next Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.